I got a call from work. There had been a homicide at the helm.
Detectives arrived. They found Ben Novack Jr. bound, tortured, and beaten to a bloody pulp inside his hotel room.
He had a lot of enemies.
He was a cutthroat.
To put it bluntly, he was a brat.
He was a successful businessman.
Fullest motive in the world, money and sex.
In 2009, Ben Novack Jr. was at the peak of his success. He was rich and lived a good life. He did not know, though, that he was about to die a terrible death. We're going to look at a sad story that is fueled by greed and jealousy. You will come across a man who believed his wealth shielded him from harm, and a woman who fulfilled her marriage vows wholeheartedly, adamant that he stay with her no matter what. From the early 1900s to the present, Miami Beach was a swampy barrier island where alligators, snakes, and bugs lived. However, during the 1920s, when times were good, rich people heard that Miami Beach was a great place to spend the winter, as shown on a billboard in Times Square. By the 1930s, about 50,000 tourists came to Miami Beach every year, which led to the construction of many Art Deco hotels. The 1940s were not a good time for tourists due to wobbly crime, but ambitious investor Ben Novack Sr. saw an opening. In just 5 years, he bought 5 hotels that housed US Marines who took over Miami Beach to get ready for the attack on Normandy. After the war, Novack Sr. ran a successful hotel business and was very involved with all of his guests and hotels. In 1954, Miami Beach was a great place for hoteliers to work because it had over 2 million tourists a year. That year, Ben Sr. built the Fontainebleau Hotel, a showy and expensive building that became the place for the rich and famous right away. Some people also say that President JFK slept with Marilyn Monroe at the Fontainebleau Hotel. Ben Sr. and his wife Bernice had their son, Ben Novack Jr. In 1956, not long after the hotel opened. There was nothing like Ben Jr.'s youth. Even though he was born into wealth, his father didn't spend much time with him because he was busy running the biggest hotel in town. When he wasn't at school, Ben Jr. spent his whole life inside the Fontainebleau. Instead of playing with other kids, little Ben was with adults. The people who worked at Fontainebleau knew that if Ben Jr. wanted something, they had to give it to him. It's hard to think of a child who is more spoiled, petted, and out of sorts than Ben Jr. He fired the hotel's chief chef for not giving him ice cream right away, even though he was only 13 years old. Even though he had a great childhood, Ben Jr. learned from watching his dad. At the age of 22, Amway, the largest multi-level marketing business, hired Ben Jr. to run conventions across the country. This was the same year that Ben Sr. lost the Fontainebleau Hotel. Ben Jr. started out with a small pay of $45,000, but he quickly started his own business called Convention Concepts Unlimited. His business did very well, and by the late 1980s he was a millionaire because he was putting together trade shows and meetings that brought in over $1 million a year. The Novack family's good times didn't last though. In 1968, Ben Sr. and Bernice got a very public and nasty divorce. In the 1970s, Las Vegas became more popular, cruise ships brought in tourists, and Disney World in Orlando became a famous vacation spot, all of which cost Ben Sr. money. Ben Sr. didn't like it when his friend Frank Sinatra offered to buy the Fontainebleau Hotel, so the two got into a fight. Because the Fontainebleau Hotel ran out of money in 1978, Ben Sr. had to sell. Ben Sr. never recovered financially, and upon his death from heart failure in 1985, all he left Bernice was a $2 million inheritance, a stark contrast to his former wealth. People in the business world quickly started calling Ben Jr. the planner from hell because he was so hard to work with. His company made almost $50 million a year thanks to his business sense, making up for his lack of niceness. As a kid and teen, Ben was very annoying and didn't have many friends or romantic interests. The only person he will always be friends with is actor Kelsey Grammer, whom he met in prep school. His first sexual encounters were probably with the sex workers at his dad's hotel. Ben's love of women and sex workers stayed with him his whole life. He had relationships that didn't last long. One was a short marriage to a Vegas showgirl named Jill Campion, which ended in divorce in 1981 because he cheated on her. As a young man, Ben met dancer Sylvia, whose real name was Narcy Pacheco, at a club for guys in 1984. Narcia, who came to the United States from Ecuador, went after Ben after learning about his family and wealth. Even though Narcia was short and curvy, which wasn't Ben's normal style, he started dating her, which surprised his friends. At first, Ben's friends liked Narcia because she seemed to know how to take care of him, but from the start, part, Bernice, Ben's mother, didn't like how rude and ignorant she was. At first, Ben didn't want anything to do with May, Narsha's daughter. This was acceptable to May's aunt, so she stayed with her. Despite having very different backgrounds, Ben and Narsha found common ground in their desire to bond in the bedroom. Narcy helped Ben's business by getting Spanish-speaking customers, but she expected Ben to be completely loyal and threatened to do terrible things like set fires if he was cheating. After 6 rough years together, Ben asked Narcy to marry him, and she became a Jew. Her 16-year-old daughter May had her first child around this time. 2 years later, she had another boy. Narcy had kept May away from her at first, but she slowly let her back into her life while she cared for her 2 grandkids. May was very angry at her mother Narcia for leaving her until it was convenient for her. Ben made Narcia sign a prenuptial agreement before they got married. Their marriage was a tricky balancing act for the next 18 years. Ben needed someone who could deal with his weird nature and meet his sexual and social needs. Narcia needed the high-class life that Ben could give her. In private, they fought badly and even damaged their house. Ben's many lovers, whom he paid for, were one of the main reasons. On June 8, 2002, while they slept, 3 masked men broke into their bedroom. Narcia called the thieves' attention as Ben grabbed for his gun, allowing them to handcuff and blindfold him for 25 hours. Narcia broke into their house and stole belongings, as well as $370,000 in cash. Narcia took off Ben's blindfold and said that no one else could have him since she couldn't have him. They were going to kill him, but she said she stopped them. She said he only lived because of her. She handcuffed Ben to a recliner and filed a domestic violence order against him. Narcia said that Ben had also given her bigger breast implants without her permission during the alleged surgery on her nose. She showed the police erotic Polaroids of young female amputees, making them think Ben might have taken them himself. Narcia didn't believe Ben's story about the home invasion. She stated that he willingly let himself be tied as part of their sexual pre-play, which allowed her to pack and leave without getting hurt. Others told him to leave Narcia because she was dangerous, but Ben and Narcia shockingly got back together. They were both afraid of losing his money or of Narcia hurting his image. Bernice, Ben's mother, was still upset and told him to be careful around Narcia, but she didn't know that she was in danger too. Ben wrote a new will on his 50th birthday in 2006, leaving Narcia his $7 million wealth. But if Bernice lived longer than him, she would get everything instead of Narcia, who would only get $200,000 and half of their house. Ben, who is 52 years old, met Rebecca Bliss, an escort who is 40 years old in 2008, and they started a relationship that went beyond sexuality. Narcia was moody, but Rebecca was calm, which made Ben laugh. He fell in love with Rebecca, moved her in secret to a fancy apartment, and made plans to divorce Narcia so that he could marry Rebecca. But Narcia found proof of the flat, which started a very violent fight. This time, Ben didn't try to make Narcia feel better. Instead, he made it clear that he wanted to separate her from Rebecca. Narcia didn't want to give up when she knew she was going to lose her fancy life again. Instead of paying divorce lawyers, she called the FBI and made up a story that Ben's convention business involved illegal immigration. It was not true to tell the FBI that Ben paid women to marry his foreign clients in exchange for green cards, and that Rebecca Bliss was next in line. What else could she say? She said Ben was using his private plane to send cocaine to Mexico. Narcia made Rebecca a direct offer of $10,000 to never see Ben again if she would not believe her. Narcia told Rebecca again that if she couldn't have Ben, no one else could, which Rebecca refused to do. Narcia, along with her brother Cristobal, planned to kill Ben because she would lose her luxurious life if he left her for Rebecca. However, Bernice had to die first because Ben's new will said that she would get everything if she lived longer than him. In February 2009, Cristobal paid 2 men to kill Bernice, but they were caught and couldn't do it. He didn't give up and found Alejandro Garcia, a crack user who agreed to help him for $1,000. Alejandro and Cristobal tried to break into Bernice's house, spay and mal, but failed. Narcia closely monitored their actions. Narcia led the failed attempts with a fake phone until April 4, 2009, when Alejandro killed Bernice by attacking her as she backed her car into the garage and hit her with a wrench. Despite her severe injuries, Bernice managed to enter the laundry room before succumbing to her injuries. The doctor said Bernice's death was an accident, even though her blood was all over the place. He thought the weak woman had just fallen again after a bad fall. The family was shocked when Narcia smiled, laughed, set up the seating like it was a meeting, and dyed Bernice's hair red. Narcia was excited when she claimed the items in Bernice's safe deposit box, which included jewelry like a necklace Sinatra had given her, knowing that soon it would all be hers and that the primary obstacle preventing Ben from becoming wealthy would vanish. Ben got $2 million from Bernice's will, even though he didn't think Narcy had anything to do with his mother's death, which he thought was odd. He hired a private detective to look over the reports, but they never got around to moving forward. Narcy and Cristobal planned to kill Ben at an upcoming Amway meeting in New York, believing it would be easier to get away with it there after Bernice's death. They hired Alejandro again, and this time he brought in Joel Gonzalez because they thought Ben would need more force. At a restaurant, Cristobal showed Ben and Narcy the gold so they could find it. Narcy desired a brutal beating and the gouging out of Ben's eyes to seize control of his business. Ben and Narcy went to New York for a meeting, but Ben didn't know that his time was running out. Two hitmen that Cristobal had hired followed them. Killers looked around the hotel and then struck Ben while he slept. Even though he tried to fight back, they beat him badly with dumbbells. Before Ben could fight back, they tied him up with duct tape. Then, one of the killers stuck a knife into Ben's eye sockets. After the brutal attack, Narcy told them to kill him while he was still alive. They choked Ben to death by putting duct tape around his head so tightly that he choked on his own vomit. After the terrible crime, Narcy gave the hitmen towels to clean up. She also took Ben's gold band to make the crime look like a failed theft. At first, the plan was to tie up Narcy too, making her look like a victim. Narcy tried to come up with a story. At 7:10 a.m., she went downstairs to assist with food service, ensuring that the security cameras caught her. Narcy came back to the room at 7:45 a.m., ready to do something. People in the room could hear her yelling about her husband. She told the cops she had left at 7 a.m. when they got there. When they came back 40 minutes later, they found Ben dead. But May, her daughter, said Narcy didn't come downstairs until 7:20 a.m., which made people suspicious. The killers didn't use a keycard, which led police to believe that someone let them in. In 2002, a tip about a home invasion at the Novaks made people even more suspicious of Narcy. During his questioning, Narcy failed the polygraph test 5 times. Even though there wasn't enough evidence to arrest Narcy yet, this infuriated May so much that it was necessary to stop her from hitting her mother. Narcy thought Ben's money was hers, so she took it out right away before the authorities could freeze the assets. This put her daughter May in a tough spot. If Narcy was found guilty of killing Ben, Florida's Slayer statute would stop Narcy from getting Ben's fortune. Instead, May's 2 sons would get it. May fought to keep Ben's assets safe by getting a judge to freeze them. Narcy didn't follow the order though, and sold off as many assets as he could. While May openly blamed her mother for the murder, Cristobal lied to the police and said that May was responsible for both Ben's death and the death of Ben's first wife, Bernice. Cristobal paid the same hitman to place guns and drugs in May's truck in an attempt to frame her. This plan did not work, though. It got so bad that Narcy's brother Carlos offered the hitman $3,000 to beat up May, but the cops stopped it. The big break came when Cristobal called police, who had been linked to Ben's murder by hitman Alejandro Garcia. He did this to divert Narcy's attention. After the call, Cristobal attempted to kill Alejandro so that he couldn't talk. Lucky for us, cops found and arrested Alejandro first in Miami on November 18th. Alejandro initially denied any involvement, but upon facing murder charges, he eventually acknowledged his involvement. He told them that Cristobal and Narcy were really the ones who killed Ben and Bernice. In July 2010, nearly a year after Ben's death, authorities caught Narcy at her home. Later that same day, the authorities also caught Cristobal. Joel Gonzalez turned himself in, which supported Alejandro's story. Narcy tried to blame her daughter May for the killings even while she was in jail. It's crazy that Cristobal tried to pay Joel $150,000 to wrongly accuse May, but Joel had already made a deal with the police. This made the case against Cristobal and Narcy even stronger. The jury found Narcy and Cristobal guilty of the 2 killings in 2012 after hearing a lot of evidence. The judge called Narcy a selfish fool for killing 2 innocent people out of greed. Cristobal maintains his innocence even now, but some family members have questioned Ben's will, which states that no one associated with the killers should receive money from the horrific crimes. After a long court fight, Ben's wealth was given to May and her 2 adult sons. This kept Narcy's family from getting rich from the murders. Novak's story is an epic saga that started with a man's dream of building a kingdom in paradise and went through great success, luxury, and finally ruin. Ben Jr. was able to put himself back together after everything fell apart, but it cost him a lot. Narcy and Ben's bad relationship was like a time bomb waiting to go off. Attachment theory helps us understand these unhealthy ways of interacting with others. About 50% of adults have secure attachment styles, preferring intimacy and independence. No one knows what kind of personality disorders Narcy and Ben have, but their crazy relationship seemed to involve a lot of them, leading to a cycle of greed, envy, and careless damage. Both pairs were in Cluster B, which means they probably fed off of each other's flaws instead of getting closer. This led to doubt, anger, and a potentially explosive situation. Many people in their group said it would end badly, calling their relationship sleeping with rattlesnakes.